Hey, what is up guys, and welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to Porsche Week. Now we are continuing the reviews of the 911s, and this one is the Porsche 911 GT3, the 996 model from 2001. So this car was very much referred to as the dark age of the Porsche 911, and I feel like that's mostly down to its styling. Even to this day, and even when it was released, a lot of people just really did not like this car, and I think it has a lot to do with its looks. So in Gran Turismo 7, this car can be bought from the Porsche dealer for 180,000 credits. So it's actually going to be more expensive to buy this one than it is to buy the 2009 model, which will be next up in terms of reviews. A bit of a strange one really, but we'll kind of, dive into the car and see what it's all about, as well as kind of, I want to kind of talk about this car because it did something very strange. So you might be thinking, well, what's strange about this car? And it's more of a personal thing. So on this channel, when it comes to car reviews, it seems to be where I get a lot more kind of personal to you guys. Like, I'm more than happy to kind of just discuss things. In the Sylvia review for the Group 4 version, I kind of, spoke about the whole kind of what was happening around the time that I started doing YouTube, and how, Gran Turismo 7 really kind of came into my life, after playing all the games. It kind of came at the right time, and all of a sudden YouTube blew up, and it completely kind of changed my life. Like, I was in a really kind of rough spot when this game came out, and now all of a sudden I'm doing really well for myself, and I'm kind of much happier. And then obviously when it came to the Super GT cars, I kind of discussed how the nostalgia I had for those kind of back in the day, especially from Gran Turismo 2 mainly, and Gran Turismo 3. But this car now, it's a strange one. So if you remember at the start of the week, I basically said I've never been the biggest fan of Porsches. And all of a sudden I got in this car and I started remembering things. And it might sound really weird, but back on the day, I believe it was like 5-6-year-old me was playing Porsche Unleashed 2000. It was a Need for Speed game on the PlayStation 1. And I sucked at it and I was terrible at it. But I was having fun. Driving all these different kind of Porsches in the very ugly graphics back then, but this car in its kind of standard road form was very prominent in the intro. It's because it had just been released at the time. It was the new fresh Porsche, and it was very, very prominent, and it kind of brought back a ton of memories I'd completely forgotten about. And then all of a sudden I'm kind of looking into, like, thinking, okay, where did I get this memory from? And I started like looking through some old discs that I have still from like the PlayStation 1, and I've got my Porsche Unleashed disc still in there, all these years later. And I was like, oh yeah, so that's when I remembered, like, it was a Need for Speed game that really gave me this really weird memory of this car. And I started looking into it more and more, and the nostalgia started coming back. I looked into the intro of the game, which is on YouTube, and I just remember seeing this Porsche. I'm like, that's where the memory came from. And it was just kind of crazy how, some of these cars in Gran Turismo 7, I don't kind of think much of, but then I'll jump in them and I'll start getting a floods of nostalgia, and half the time I'm wondering where it's coming from. But yeah, essentially, a Need for Speed game gave me a whole heap of nostalgia for this car. And there's a sort of a remix track in there called Are You Ready? It's very sort of euphoric, classic, trancy vibes from like way back in the, early 2000s days. And, I think something I kind of did with this car after the review was basically blast out this, trance song and did a few laps in the Porsche, and the nostalgia just came crashing back. So yeah, pretty insane how a single car in a video game can just bring tons of memories back from your childhood. So this car really does have a bit of a special place in my heart, and it's kind of brought back a feeling for Porsche that I never really knew I had in recent years. So yeah, absolutely awesome. So let's get on to the car itself. I just thought I'd kind of give you a little bit of a backstory. So the car itself, well, it's fast. Now, this is obviously not the standard version. This is the GT3 model, so it's got extra aero. I mean, this thing is just definitely no slouch. It's got a massive up in kind of its horsepower. So now, instead of putting out like 295 like the previous ones was, this one is putting out 355 brake horsepower from standard. Now that is very, very quick. You know, in terms of sports cars from the early 2000s, I feel like at this point the 911 is kind of still in that sports car kind of sort of area. It's not quite gone towards sort of supercar pace just yet, but it sits very nicely as sort of a high performance sports car, and it definitely feels like one also. So this car is definitely sort of referred to as sort of like the dark ages for the Porsche 911, and I mean, for me, with all the nostalgia I now have for this car coming flooding back, I don't see why, but I can understand why. And I feel like most of it is down genuinely to its styling. It's quite a bit different from all the previous Porsche 911s. Now, I've always been commenting in the, in the previous reviews about sort of the frog eyes, the the bar along the back, and the kind of the shape they're quite sort of bulky, short looking kind of cars, and this one definitely looks like it's kind of been stretched out, completely different front end, completely different back end. The only thing that kind of really gives it a 911 vibe is sort of the general shape of sort of the roof and such like that. So it is a completely different kind of styling design from any of the other 911s, and I feel like a lot of people just really didn't like that. Now Porsche is kind of sort of mixed between this and classic cars in more recent times, but I just feel like this is a car that kind of gets hated on a lot more than any of the other Porsche 911 models. Now, even in terms of if you look at going to buy one of these in real life, they are much cheaper. Well, that's sort of like the standard models, much cheaper than any of the other 911s. Now, I mean, I just jumped on sort of Auto Trader to kind of look into real life prices of these things, and you can pick one up from as little as like 10 grand now. I mean, even a few years ago, obviously COVID bumping up used car prices and such, especially here in the UK. I don't know about elsewhere in the world, but basically a few years ago I kind of looked at buying a Porsche Boxster, and there was a 911 on there, and I think it was only like something like 5-6 grand. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was the bog standard version, but to own a Porsche 911 for so cheap, even though it had some miles on it, it's just pretty insane, really. And it's still the same now. Like, this model of Porsche, the 996, is the cheapest one, and kind of the one where most people could probably save up enough money in their lifetime, no matter what, to be able to kind of just jump in and buy one at some point in their life. And yeah, I feel like it's definitely the more kind of hated of the 911s, and I can kind of see why, but at the same time I definitely do not hate this car. In terms of Gran Turismo 7, it's awesome, sound wise, brakes, handling, it's still twitchy, but very controllable. It definitely feels a lot more civilized than anything else, and it's fast. It is definitely quick, definitely the quickest coming onto this big straight here, compared to the the others. So definitely a massive jump up in kind of performance level from the the previous models that we've tested, even the Club Sport, which obviously was, to me, one of the most insane Porsches ever made. So yeah, genuinely a really fast, enjoyable lap. I know I've not really touched on the car too much, because what can you say, it's just a typical 911, but just a bit quicker. But I just kind of thought it's nicer sometimes to just sit back and let the nostalgia take over and kind of discuss it with you guys. Some of you might not be interested, so I'm sorry about that, but some of you kind of like to be on a more personal level with some of the creators that you might watch. So interior wise, well, it's not bad. To today's standards, it's nothing really. It kind of looks like, I know I might sound like I say this in every video, but it looks like typical 2000s cheap plasticky look. However, you can see there's a built-in roll cage, pretty standard in the way it kind of looks on the steering wheel. I'm not a big fan of the steering wheel they've used in here. The dials definitely look more alive than any of the previous models. That manual transmission, always awesome, stick shift. But I mean, the steering wheel, yeah, I'm not a fan. Probably the worst one we've seen so far. You know, in terms of interior, it's well detailed. Well, you know, what can you expect really? They all pretty much are. But you know, I'm just not the biggest fan of the interior. I feel like in many ways, although it looks kind of cleaner, it just looks too plasticky and a bit of a step back really, even from the previous models. So I forgot my individual sector times, so I'm sorry about that. But it has topped the 500 category by a fair chunk as well. 7 seconds it has beaten the Club Sport out by. So within 6 years, we've seen, you know, what, 7 seconds worth of improvement. So, and that's kind of what we want to see. So it's kind of cool to see every single car we've looked at has had a massive, you know, kind of jump in performance. And it now looks like 911s are dominating the 500 category. However, that will change. So when it comes to customization, well, what else was I going to do? I was going to put a big fat wide body on it and basically make it the most incredibly modified version of this car that I could. Obviously, you know, pretty much looking like a Liberty Walk performance vehicle, mostly done with actually the vinyls and kind of livery editor in this game, so it looks really, really good actually. I'm kind of surprised how it actually turned out when I equipped this. Sadly, I can't remember the creator, but awesome job if you created this. So obviously we took it around the high speed ring, and you know what? Performance wise, it was perfect. So obviously there's no turbo in this car, naturally aspirated, all that good stuff. There's no kind of option to put a turbo on, and do you know what, usually that kind of hinders these cars. However, it didn't hinder this one. Definitely hitting higher top speeds than the previous models, up to around about 180 to 185, so not, you know, not at the 200 mark like the original turbo was. However, it's definitely no slouch. However, that snap is definitely there for this car. That's one thing I did notice when I modified it, that the snap was really prominent when modified. We didn't actually have as much of a problem in any of the previous models really, bar the original turbo, which was quite snappy, but insanely powerful and insanely quick. Definitely a fun drive around, and it felt, you know, quite fast in a straight line. It didn't feel like I was doing 180, it felt like I was doing more like 300 miles an hour. So, you know, huge heap of fun around the high speed ring, and definitely one you might want to look into modifying yourself. So definitely don't sleep on the 996. I know a lot of you will kind of, you know, shove it off as like the ugly 911, or basically just Sally from Cars, but seriously, it's definitely an awesome machine. So lap time wise, it's yeah, an improvement again, in a sense really. Very much close now, as you can see. Not even, you know, 1/10 of a second splitting the current one, which is the 996, the 930, and the Sirocco. So not quite, you know, getting up to the pace of the 930. However, it's very close between those three. So awesome to see. So that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for joining me and basically having a trip back in time with me and this car. And it was kind of cool to give it a quick talking about, and basically kind of speaking about things from my childhood, to think that obviously I've gone from playing racing games all my life, even as a kid, to now all of a sudden I'm in a position where I can sit there on the internet and talk about virtual cars. I mean, it's pretty damn awesome. And really, I really do appreciate it. It's videos like this where I can kind of take a step back and really genuinely appreciate every single one of you for the support that you give me. So I hope you are genuinely enjoying Porsche Week. I'll see you all in the next one. Big shout out to our channel members. Seriously, your support's much appreciated. Don't forget to, if you want to, donate. And I'll see you all in the next one. Cheers, guys. Peace.